Monday nights will never be the same. Rift Rewind is coming to ESPN Esports. I am joined by Emily Rand, and this Monday we are going to go live for our first pre-show to Monday Night League Rift Rewind on ESPN Esports, Twitch channel, YouTube, Twitter, everywhere you can find the show. Emily, it's been a wild weekend, the first weekend for LEC and LCS, LCK and LPL, either postponed or still waiting for it to kick off. What are your general thoughts coming out of week one?
So I was at Call of Duty League Championships, so my experience was not watching a lot of these things live, but going back and like watching VODs and doing jungle pathing. I think that NA is still playing very slow, and I'm not saying that just because of TSM IMT, which
that was one of the worst games
I was like, okay, guys, I'm ready to review VODs. And everyone was like, either like, you need to watch TSM IMT, or they were like, you need to skip TSM IMT.
That was a parrot. When people make fun of LCS and they're like, oh, this like LCS, they just go back and forth with no real objective control, and they just go mid, and they like, oh, it's NA RAM. That actually was what Immortals versus TSM was. It was two teams batting their head back and forth in mid lane, trying to fight over Baron. That was not a good game. I think just branching off that, TSM, I predicted them to win the World Championship. That might have been.
Wait, was that? I thought you were memeing.
Yeah, it was a total meme. It was such a great meme. But yeah, TSM. I mean, even though it's like that was joking, I still thought TSM looked like a team that could win Spring. I thought they could be the team going to MSI. I thought they could be a team that could, make a semifinals, finals run if everything came together. They practiced. They were scrimming. They were in Korea. They were in China. This was a team that had maybe some of the most. They had the most like off-season chemistry you would hope to believe because of how much time they practiced. And then they 0-2, losing to Surefire Team Liquid, which at least it's that's Team Liquid, right? That's still Core JJ, Double Lift, Impact. It's still one of the best teams in the world. But then they lose to Immortals, who I think a lot of people had them after their first game ranked last, or looked like a team that just didn't have any life in them. And Immortals had only been practicing for a few days because Soaz and Ica
almost like no practice
team,
as a team. Yeah.
Talk a little bit of that.
So the big thing with Immortals is that Soaz and Ica didn't get here until like really, really late. For TSM, I think that Dardoch is a much needed energy in their early game. I think if you look at their early games, if you look at some of his pathing, especially because I was able to study the Team Liquid game a little bit more than I was able to study the Immortals game, I'm sorry. I think that, he's this much needed energy early on. I see that they're still invading second blue, which, some things never change. I like it. I don't like it or dislike it. It just is. It is a constant. It is an LCS constant now. But I think in terms of TSM, what it is more down to their mid-game transitions and how they're looking at and communicating side lanes and stuff like that. So going forward, if they can get that down, I think they'll be fine. I think they can definitely recover from this week. I also think that you say like, oh yeah, Surefire, Team Liquid, but Team Liquid still, even when we knew about their visa issues, we all rated them number one. Yeah. So I think that the Immortals loss really hurts, definitely more than the TL loss. And so hopefully they can regroup and kind of focus on that mid game. Another thing that I do want to bring up, like piggybacking off of that, just from an analytical standpoint, I hate how big Elder Drake is. I really do. I didn't see as much of this in China. There were a few games where it was obviously like very apparent that whichever team got Elder was going to win, auto win the game. But because the LPL plays so much faster, it wasn't as noticeable. But when I watched LCS, it was very noticeable.
Because the teams behind, you can lose inhib, you can lose 2 inhibs, just stretch the game out, and just like, hey, we're down 12k gold. But if we can steal the Elder Drake, then it's just OP and we're going to win the game anyway. So it becomes a situation of kind of just LCS games getting stretched out even farther than they really should, even as a slow-playing region.
Yeah, I'm like looking up from Call of Duty and I'm like, oh, this LCS game seems to be going on for a while. Yeah. Like, keep checking. Oh, it's about to go over an hour. Okay.
Looking at a team who didn't play quite slow, The team that I was most impressed by in week 1, I think it'll be discussion between a few teams, is FlyQuest.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like both of us were very happy about their offseason changes. Ignar coming in kind of under the radar, not really anyone talking about him, teaming back up with Power of Evil from the Misfits days. He was incredible in week 1. His Leona, his Blitzcrank, he just changed the dynamic of the team so quickly. And I talked to Wild Turtle about it, and he's like, yeah, we finally have an identity of being this crazy, wild, aggressive team that I think Turtle's always wanted to be on. I think he had that with Immortals, and I think that's when Turtle was at his best, during those first Immortal seasons with Hooney and Rainover and Adrian and Pole Belcher, because those guys would just walk through teams.
Well, you see Viper is like that too.
Yeah.
You know, there were times last year where Wild Turtle and Viper would just be like way ahead of the team, and they're going in, and it just ends up looking really foolish because the rest of the team isn't there.
But now you have Ignar there, who actually can be the engage tool to lead those two guys into battle, and it works. And I think Santorin has always been incredibly underrated.
Santorin was one of my favorite junglers last year, actually.
Yeah, he's been solid. And I think people don't talk about him because he's very quiet. He's a very quiet, nice guy. I think he has the unfortunate past of being a Bjergsen ward. Like, when people talk about the Bjergsen wards and how the junglers lose their strength or whatever, it's Santorin, right? Because it's like Santorin was so hyped up his first season, won Rookie of the Split, they won everything, and then he just became, a footnote. I think with this new team, I think he's going to get a rejuvenation of kind of his career. And I really, really, really love FlyQuest. I'm not going to say, FlyQuest is going to win LCS, but I actually would not say that they can make a final. Why can't they make a final? In a season of TSM looking shaky, with TL, who knows when Brox is going to come. C9 also looked very good, but I'm not totally sold on them yet until they have a rough patch, because I think Sneaky's greatness was when C9 ever faltered or had a bad weekend. Sneaky was the guy who was always like, who cares? Like, let's just go to practice. We're going to have fun anyway. So I think C9's true test will be when they have a bad weekend and how they bounce back from that. But I think FlyQuest kind of has settled into that like dark horse spot of like the third, fourth spot. And a lot of teams this weekend were talking, they looked really good in scrims and they looked really good on stage. So FlyQuest, go green, plant those trees. It's a very good start for them.
Yeah, first of all, I love the FlyQuest jerseys. I'm not sure how controversial that is, but I just want to throw that out there. I think another thing about this team is that if you look at, PoE and Ignar have played together as well, so that's something that you want to also consider. But with a mid laner like PoE, who is kind of can play a more like steady, like centering presence in lane. I also look at past Ignar teams and I try to think like, okay, because Ignar, in my opinion, either looks like insanely good or completely out of sync with his team. And it's a similar thing with Wild Turtle. It's a similar thing that we saw as Viper was getting acclimated to the team last year. So I think that in practice, if this team can continue to all be on the same page in terms of when they're going in, this is going to be a very formidable team in North America, because a lot of North American teams are not willing to get up in your face like that. And this past weekend, we saw that FlyQuest was definitely willing to, even playing their comfort stuff, get up in your face.
Go right through him on Ribbon. You saw Viper 1v5 when he was fed on Ribbon. And the final team I want to talk about in NA, another huge surprise, my man, the rookie of the split, the man I've been hyping up, Johnson, finally, the only rookie in the league. It was a team that I think a lot of people had doubts on, because it was like, can Hooney and Frog get along? Is Aframu washed? Johnson, he's a rookie. Who plays rookies in NA? Grigg has always been overlooked.
No, people like Johnson because he was a rookie, because everyone was like, there are no rookies.
And he has 4 accounts in top 10. I mean, when you have that kind of mechanical talent to get 4 accounts in top 10, that's impressive. But I think it was a lot more about Aframu and like, if Aframu can help this kid actually do anything, because Aframu came off a really poor last year on 100 Thieves. And I think, and I tweeted about this, it's kind of a weird coincidence. In 2016 spring, he was with Stixay, a rookie. They went to the final. 2018, Cody's son, another young AD carry, went to the final. 2020, new team, Dignitas, young AD carry, Johnson. Are they going to go to the final? And I think I've seen Jat and a lot of other analysts really, really hype up Dignitas after week 1, because they looked really good. Froggen looks locked in. Greg is doing what he has to do. He's on a team where he has 2 really strong solo lanes, and he has a veteran bottom laner and Aphromoo to pair up with, so he doesn't have to do much on this team. So what are your thoughts on Dig? Is it overreacting, or is there actual truth in that they could be a top team in the league?
I was pleasantly surprised by Dig. Going back and looking at, I'll say, like, I did this super late, thanks to Invert for correcting my jungle pathing sheets, by the way. I think that if there's going to be a player in there that needs to level up, if they want to be, like, if you are talking, okay, we're going to go with the overreaction, we're going to go with they're definitely a finals team, I do think the player that has to level up a little bit is Greg, because I do think that Sven Skaren was able to best him in a situation where Greg had both scuttles and had done the late invade on Lee Sin and kind of tried to make the most of what was a matchup advantage for him. Sven Skaren then came back and completely erased that with the spot lane gank, and obviously that's only in the first 5 or 6 minutes of the game, right? But I think that in order for them to be considered a finalist team, that's probably where they need to level up. I think we also need to look at, in a loss, how Huni and Froggen are going to deal with distribution. Because I do think that any team that has such solo laners that really need a lot of attention, a lot of resources, I think that's always something that you have to consider. But again, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, right? Especially if they can get down some of these TP timings to where it works. One of the big things about that Sven Skaren gank bot is that it drew 4 TPs if you're including the lane TP. And if you can get that down to where it actually pays off for Dig and they get a kill, because Huni's going to TP in there, he's going to hit that button and he's going through whether you like it or not. So if they can coordinate that better, then I think we're talking about this team as a finals team. But obviously right now it's super early.